Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to this week's episode of the Last Round Boxing Podcast. After a absent week last week, we apologize for that. We've been mentioning on the last several episodes, the last couple months, we are now on YouTube. If you search the Last Round Boxing Podcast, you should see our logo pop up, our cartoonish logo at the Last Round Boxing Podcast. I believe it's youtube.com/at the Last Round Boxing Podcast. So if you're a YouTube connoisseur or fan and want to listen on there, the podcast is now uploaded to YouTube, in addition to all the other podcasting applications like Apple and Spotify and all these other ones that are used around the world. Jumping straight back into it, fight reviews, this past Saturday, the 6th of July, from the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey on ESPN+. Shakur Stevenson, in his final fight of his contract with Top Rank, Bob Arum's Top Rank, remains undefeated at 22-0 with a unanimous decision win over 12 rounds against Artem Hartuyan. I think I pronounced that wrong. Who takes the second loss of his career. Stevenson wins by scores of 116-112, 118-110, and 119-109, and retains his WBC lightweight championship. Stevenson's last fight under Top Rank, and he's been getting a lot of criticism again, which just seems to be the story of his career the last couple years or so. Stevenson was once at the point where he was just people know he has talent, but because he's not pleasing in terms of fighting style to the casual fan or just even the hardcore fan, it's affecting his value as a fighter financially and his stock value as a fighter, which you could recover from. He's still young. I think he's mid-20s, maybe late 20s, but I think he's late 20s maybe. But this has been the main criticism that Shakur Stevenson has been receiving for quite a while now, that he's just not entertaining. He doesn't go for the knockout. He stays on cruise control. I had a conversation with somebody about Stevenson just after the fight, and they talked about like how Floyd Mayweather was kind of the same. Like, oh, well, Mayweather wasn't that exciting. He was also kind of boring. In a way, yes, but Mayweather was fighting high-profile guys, or at least, and he fought the high-profile guys because he was at the Canelo level where, it didn't matter which promotional body you were with, you were going to fight him. But you also got to think about that Mayweather hit his peak before social media became so significant. Mayweather was utilizing HBO Boxing 24/7, Showtime All Access. So people were tuning into that because there was still limited forms of entertainment for people to consume. So Mayweather was utilizing that so many people did for so many years, the avenue of TV and all that, before social media really took over in a sense. And Shakur Stevenson doesn't have that. He's on social media and all that, but you don't see these casual fans or these, this extended fan base who are following these fighters on Twitter or on Instagram or these other social platforms where they can utilize that leverage into getting viewers on fight night. So how does I mean, I'm sure it's an easy question, but how does Shakur Stevenson fix this? What does he do? He's a free agent now, so what does he do from here?
It's his style, though, isn't it? I think like everyone's been kind of saying on podcasts and on Twitter is he's tried to be money Floyd before he was Pretty Boy. Kind of like Pretty Boy, he kind of came, hit the scene and was knocking people out and would stand and fight. And then when he got to those big fights against Oscar and people like that, that's when he decided like, okay, it's going to have to be more of a safety first. And then he kind of realized that, okay, I'm going to have to put all of the stigma like on the O, and that's why he kind of created that character. Because he was always just trying to protect the O. And that was kind of like how he sold it. And people still liked his style, where I think that's the problem Shakur has is he's not Floyd. He doesn't have that, big persona yet. And he's good. He's good to watch in small doses. But after a while, the problem you have is, he's going to win. Like he'll need every single round, and then he doesn't He doesn't slip it into fourth or fifth gear and just take someone out of there. When he's substantially better than them, like he could have done this weekend. It's kind of like watching a girls fight. Essentially, because you just know there's going to be no knockouts, which kind of like you get bored, you end up playing on your phone, you go for a beer, you start talking to your friends. Like, it's not like watching a Wilder fight where you can't take your eyes off the screen because like at any moment he could knock him out. That's just not, unfortunately, what Shakur has. And taking nothing away from him, he's a 2-3 weight world champion. Unbelievable talent. He just doesn't get the knockouts, but that's what we're here to watch. Unfortunately, it's that's why we watch it.
Do you think that he just doesn't have the power, or do you think he just doesn't go for it? Because he obviously has the talent and the placement of the punches.
Yeah, it's hard to say because when he was fighting lesser opponents, I guess, which maybe he's a bit mean, he would stand and fight and he would take them out, and it looked like it was there. And I don't know whether now because the opposition's better and maybe he has a feeling his chin's not that great or something, he doesn't stand and fight and do it. And it works well when he's fighting someone like an Oscar Valdez, someone who's going to come forward constantly because it plays into his game plan. It's similar to like Sonny Edwards. They're both, that kind of like back foot. They want to counter you constantly. So when he fights someone who knows that and thinks, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be the bull and matador. Why would I? Because I'm playing into his game plan. There's no plan B. There's no plan B for him.
And now he's a free agent, and Bob Arum, it's a revolving door with Bob Arum and these fighters. I mean, Top Rank's been in the boxing business for what? I don't even know how long. This 78. I don't even know. Long time. Probably more than I think in terms of years. And Bob Arum has talked about these fighters when they're getting close to the end of their contract. He most recently, before Shakur Stevenson, he was talking about Terrence Crawford, that he's lost money on his fights, and then Crawford becomes a free agent. And now Top Rank and Bob Arum have been doing it with Shakur Stevenson. And I mean, where does he go? He's obviously going to get offers. I don't think people shouldn't look at his situation now that he's a free agent and think, oh, nobody's going to want to sign him. No, he will get offers. He will get offers because he's 22-0. He's a young fighter. He is still one of the best fighters between 135 and 140. He's an Olympian, an American Olympian. So it's not that he won't get offers. I think you need to look at it in terms of he likely won't get the offers in terms of financial compensation that he wants, or him and his team wants. What was the reported report offer from Top Rank?
15 million, 5 fight, so 3 million guaranteed per fight.
So, I mean, to the average Joe out there, like us or anybody else, that's a ton of money. Well, that's a ton of money. He's already been making good money, obviously, which I get it, but it's like he didn't want to take it. And if he secures a bigger fight deal financially in terms of financial packages, whether it's with Matchroom, with Golden Boy, PBC, or whoever, maybe it's maybe the Saudis pick him up, then, in a way, let me ask you this. This is a question that's popped into my mind. If he's going to get offers from all these promoters, or they're all going to test the waters here. And if he gets a bigger deal, which, it's not out of the realm of possibility in terms of financial compensation, more than the $15 million for 5 fights that Top Rank offered him at the end of his free agency with them. Does that just reinforce his mentality in terms of like, it doesn't matter how I fight. I'm still going to get paid and I'll still win these fights?
I mean, if he gets big offers, then yeah, he's right, we're wrong. But when you've got, Eddie Hearn has been asked several times this week in interviews, would you want to speak to Shakur? And he pretty much said the same thing, like, yeah, we're going to speak to him, but we need to try to convince him that what he thinks he's worth is not what he's worth,
Right.
And that's from Eddie. Obviously, that offer from Bob Arum is unbelievable. And if you look at the landscape of his division, it's all Top Rank. So he's kind of where he needs to be, because apart from the one big fight against Gervonta Davis, and William Zepeda, okay, 2 fights, Golden Boy, one with PBC, or Giovani Davis is pretty much a free agent, right? You've got Lomachenko, Morataya, Navarrete, Keyshawn Davis. They're all with Top Rank.
No, right. I agree with that, but you don't think that he'll just move up to 140 if let's just say Ryan or something say, hey, well, let's try to make the fight. I think he would.
I mean, for money, yeah, he's going to have to, and then
yeah,
it's going to be tricky because he's not been knocking people out at 135. So
no, right, yeah, but I don't think he's isolated at 135. I don't think he's necessarily stuck there. I think if he gets an offer at 140 or a catchweight 143 or something, he'll take it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look up there, then Matchroom would be the place, right? Haney, Teofimo Lopez, Leon Paro, Mateus, Jose Ramirez, Isaac Cruz, Richard Hitchens, Regis Prograis, Arnold Barboza, Jack Catterall. You'd want to be with Matchroom.
Right. I mean, how likely is it that he just stays like how Canelo's been doing it, or how Terrence Crawford technically is kind of doing it now in terms of fight-by-fight basis? How likely do you think we see that? I think that his first fight with a promoter following Top Rank will probably, I say there's a 60% chance that the first fight, now that his deal with Top Rank has ended, assuming it's with a new promoter and a new broadcaster, it'll be one fight. It'll be one fight because I don't think he'll want to get locked in unless they pay him very, very handsomely, which is more than Top Rank offered him. I think his first fight is going to be a one-fight deal.
The problem with the one-fight deal is they're not going to want to pay him well if he's going to go in there, take the money, win the fight, and disappear. They don't get anything back. That's why there's normally 2 or 3, because they can, effectively lose the first fight. Shakur wins the title and walks off with whatever, but then they get a second and a third on the back end, right? That's the thing. That's the problem I think he's going to have, is I think he thinks he's Canelo when he's not. It's kind of like what Crawford did, right? He worked out his contract, pretty much bankrupted BLK Prime.
That's insane.
When he got 10 million to fight David Avanesyan, someone we're going to talk about later. And, they were never to be seen from or heard from again, pretty much. So
I still don't know where that, I feel like there's a deeper story there at that BLK Prime. Like, where did they come from? Who put up that money? I know there was reports and then people did some digging and stuff like that, but I just feel like, how do you just jump in like that and spend that kind of money in a sport that is notorious for losing money and not having an investment type of profile? I've never understood that. I've never understood that. It's just like, oh, well, somebody obviously just had a bunch of money to play with that they didn't care about losing, so I'm going to put on this fight so they can put it on their professional portfolio. Like, oh yeah, I put on a boxing pay-per-view once with one of the best fighters in the world. Oh, okay. How'd that go? Oh, we just did a one fight deal. Oh, how much money did you put in? Oh, like 30 million. Yeah, but we lost the money, but it was cool. It was a once in a lifetime experience. Like, I mean, that's kind of how I looked at that. At BLK Prime, it's like, where did that money go? Who put up that money? There was no reinvestment in the sport. I mean, that's a big criticism of the sport, is that there's no reinvestment in the future. Like, so for Stevenson, focusing on his fight this past Saturday in New Jersey, he's obviously from New Jersey, Newark, that area. He's fought there a couple times already. And the reported attendance in the building was, I think, just under 10,000, maybe like 8,000. I believe this was the lowest number of fans in attendance for any of his fights that have taken place in New Jersey during his days as a professional. And then the ESPN telecast started filming the crowd walking out. I mean, whether they were walking to the bathroom or they were leaving or whatever, obviously it didn't look good on TV. And then how the commentators were talking about it, but whether Top Rank or ESPN said to do that shot or not, I mean, it obviously didn't make Shakur Stevenson and his team happy. And Stevenson, ever since that day, has been on Twitter just talking smack to different people, to different reporters, to different Twitter personalities that, are just trying to get a rise out of him. And then I don't understand it. Like, and then these young guys, they say that this stuff doesn't it doesn't affect them and they don't care about them. And then in these interviews, they're like, oh, I don't care about that. But it obviously does. It obviously does. I mean, the proof is right there. You keep going back to that well. And he keeps tweeting about it and responding to these different people and saying this, saying that, saying this profanity, saying this in terms of racial terms. Like, he was. I mean, we're not lying here. Like, you could go to his Twitter. It's on there. It's like, it is what it is. And if people are going to keep coming after you like that, they're going to keep getting a rise out of you if they see you respond. Like, these young guys, and we'll talk about Ryan Garcia later, but he's the same way. He's the same way. These young guys just like they take the bait. And even though he won, he retained his title. And he's a free agent now, like we keep saying. Top Rank obviously has like been in the game long enough where they're just like, we're not going to lose money. I mean, that's the nature of the game usually. And Top Rank is, I don't want to say notorious, but they've been in the game long enough where they're just like, you don't want to stay with us? Then go on. I mean, they happened with them with De La Hoya, with Floyd Mayweather, Mikey Garcia, and those are just like more recent examples. There was obviously way more before that. And Terrence Crawford, and now Stevenson, So, I don't know, man. He's obviously going to get offers. Let me ask you, where do you think he ends up? And does he fight by the end of this year again?
Matchroom maybe, or a very short deal with PBC. I don't know though, because they always avoid.
PBC doesn't have the money, man.
Yeah, they always avoid
No, they don't have the money. They're not really. I think they didn't. Somebody just re-sign with him. Wasn't there a fighter that just reportedly re-signed, or they just signed or something? I feel like I saw something. Maybe I'm wrong with Al Heyman and all that, but PBC doesn't have that money. They just don't. That's why you see all these other fighters fighting with these other promoters and broadcasters. Look at Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather was just at the Nate Diaz Jorge Masvidal fight that happened in Anaheim, California. That boxing fight, and his young prospect. What's his name? Carmel Moulton.
Yeah.
He was on that card. That wasn't a PBC card. So I'd be surprised if he goes with like PBC Al Heyman. I'd be really surprised. It's like,
like you said, maybe matchroom at 140 and they offer him like a Jack Catterall, Regis Prograis, and then the final boss being Devin Haney.
I mean, maybe, but I don't know, man. That's a hard one. Like, I would. The only legitimate players that you think would work, if you think about in terms of stature, financial compensation, who can make it work, who have the connections, the broadcast partners, is Golden Boy and Matchroom, right?
Yeah, just the Golden Boy don't really, apart from Zepeda, don't really have anybody, at that weight.
I mean, like, I honestly, if I was Stevenson,
Barboza.
Yeah, if I was Stevenson, like, I would look at Golden Boy too. I would look at Golden Boy. I mean, obviously, Matchroom and Golden Boy are with DAZN, but Golden Boy can be like, hey, let's put you and Zepeda against each other. Zepeda, we'll talk about him in a couple minutes, but Zepeda is like number one in every sanctioning body's rankings right now at 135. And Stevenson has a WBC belt. Putting that fight on in LA? I mean, Stevenson would be the A side with the title, so maybe it wouldn't happen in LA. But imagine that fight in LA, like, it would draw a crowd. Zepeda, the Mexican fighter, against Stevenson, the champ, the American fighter. Like, think about it. And then they can use Ryan's name to be like, hey, look, we have Ryan too, and we have Jose Ramirez, we have Arnold Barboza. We can make some exciting fights with you, and you're going to be fighting all these Mexican guys who their fans show up. They'll show up at the gate. I mean, but Eddie Hearn's obviously, he's always in the mix. He's got fighters on his side too. I mean, I just don't see it, man. I just don't see it. I could see Stevenson trying to just make one fight with whichever promoter, most likely somewhere on DAZN, and kind of go from there, because he won't go more than 2 fights in terms of a deal. And even then, at 2 fights, I would think it's a lot for him, unless they're paying him a ton of money. Like, I mean, what do you think I don't know if he said it or not, but what do you think he's looking for? If Top Rank offered him $15 million for 5 fights, $3 million a fight, what is he looking for per fight? 5? 6?
I'm assuming he's thinking to himself, he's looking at 4 or 5, or maybe it was just the length of the deal. Maybe, like you said, he wants to pick and choose, and he already thinks he's a Crawford. He already thinks he's a Canelo, and he can just bounce around, picking out like 6 mil, 7 mil, 8 mil, 6 mil, 7 mil.
Right. I mean, like, and he's obviously close to Terrence Crawford.
Right.
Terrence Crawford was at that fight. I think he was at Shakur's fight. If you had to speculate, what do you think Terrence Crawford is telling him?
Probably the same. I mean, they were both at Top Rank, so maybe he's telling him like, hey, you've even though you're young, you've outgrown them. You've already picked up, multiple world championships, and because Crawford, unfortunately, from what people say, has a similar, sense of grandiose, I guess, where
right,
he thinks that his achievements mean X amount of money, where unfortunately it doesn't. It's popularity is what actually pays.
Right. And that's the truth. So you think Matchroom? He ends up at Matchroom with a deal.
It's just, if you kind of like looking at it, Eddie's already said that he's interested if the figures are right. And then if you look at the 135 and the 140, they have, a few fighters in each category. So it would make sense to go there. But unfortunately, boxing doesn't always make sense, because he probably was actually if he's going to stay at 135, he probably was at the right promoter in Top Rank. Because like I said, listed before, they probably had the most fighters at 135. So if he's looking at 140, maybe Matchroom.
Let me pose this question to you. Who do you think is more valuable, Teofimo Lopez or Shakur Stevenson?
You talk like in terms of crowd and...
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have said Teofimo Lopez, but then that Miami fight, I think there was only a couple of thousand there, 2 or 3.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But also take everything into account. Like, Lopez is lost, but he has the personality, but Lopez also Lopez, regardless, always fights to the level of his opponent, whether he's more talented or not. And he always ends up fighting at the level of his opponent. It's strange. But that's the kind of fighter he is. So who's more valuable, Stevenson or Lopez? If you kind of just had to,
I think if promoted correctly, Teofimo.
Right. But I'm talking about right now. Like, if you were a promoter business-wise, you're just like, okay, I have to choose one to make, to put on an event, but also most bang for my buck.
I still think Teofimo, because I think he still gets you those show-stopping endings, doesn't he? If you look at some of the knockouts he's got, over time, I still think that he can perform on the day. He's just a little bit inconsistent. I still think Teofimo, on his day, when he's got his mind right, he does no PR. Like, before he went on this downward spiral, he could do no wrong.
Right, exactly. So it's going to be interesting to see where Stevenson ends up. But now he's, as of today at least, unless something changes, he is a free agent, no longer with Top Rank. And like you mentioned, Top Rank has a lot of talent at 135, but unless Stevenson signs a multi-fight deal with them in the next couple months or so, I think Stevenson can forget about getting any type of opponent that's under the Top Rank banner in the foreseeable future, because Top Rank is not going to let any of their fighters that they have around that weight class fight Stevenson, especially with the split that they've had in terms of relationship. So, like you said, he's going to have to focus his sights with these other promoters: Matchroom, DAZN, Golden Boy, PBC with Gervonta Davis. That's where he's going to have to focus his time at. And honestly, think about it. I mean, Davis is running out of opponents, and they put Frank Martin on there because Frank Martin is he's a PBC guy essentially, but they're running out of guys right there. There's really nobody left in terms of under the Al Heyman banner. And with Canelo, they've obviously realized that. That's why they made the Jaime Munguia fight. And then there's reports that Edgar Berlanga and Chris Eubank Jr. are on the short list for Canelo. But those aren't PBC guys. So honestly, I think the wild card is that Stevenson and Davis fight in the next probably 7 to 10 months. But that's primarily if because PBC needs to produce for the Amazon Prime Video deal. They need to show them like, oh yeah, look, we're making marquee matchups. And they get Shakur Stevenson to do it. They don't have to share any of that revenue with Top Rank or anybody. But is it too dangerous of a fight for somebody like Tank Davis? I mean, he's PBC's guy. He's the guy. He's Al Heyman. That's his guy, like his star power now. I mean, don't be surprised, Stevenson Davis, like because the business side of PBC is forcing their hand to do that. Don't be surprised about that. I can see it. They have to show their worth to Amazon Prime Video. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Moving on in the co-main event, Robson Conceicao gets the controversial, probably the most controversial fight of the weekend. Split decision win over Oshaki Foster by scores of 116-112, 115-113, and 112-116. Conceicao becomes the WBC super featherweight champion of the world. What did you think about this controversial decision?
I think going into the fight, I thought Oshaki was going to win. I always liked Robson Conceicao, good fighter. Probably beat Oscar Valdez back in the day when Valdez popped hot, and then the WBC just allowed him to fight anyway in Arizona. Pretty strange fight. Wasn't the best fight to watch. Conceicao constantly applying kind of pressure, but missing with a lot of punches. Foster kind of laying back, picking his spots to counter. Played a lot of defense, which is the thing I think that went against him. I think that a lot of the judges probably thought, well, Oshaki's just kind of like laying back, doing a lot of defense. And I think that was why Conceicao was picking up so many rounds, because the judges were just kind of looking at like, well, Conceicao's the guy going forward. He's the guy applying the pressure constantly. Like he's kind of like dictating the fight, where Oshaki was kind of doing your, countering and sitting back. And, I think trying to hope that Conceicao would kind of punch himself out. And that was, kind of giving the judges the fact that he was just kind of sitting back and not doing a lot, where he was kind of countering a lot more. And I think he actually landed more than Conceicao on CompuBox. So he kind of like lost it himself by doing that, I think, unfortunately for Oshaki. So at the minute, we haven't had the WBC come out and say that they're going to mandate an immediate rematch. So, if you're Conceicao, if there's no mandatory rematch in there, I think he's going to run off with the title. Well, this is his third or fourth chance. So good for him. Had a long amateur career in the Olympics and stuff, and I think he's his third or fourth shot in the pro ranks. So it's not his fault. I'm sure he enjoyed his weekend.
So if you had to choose a side here, was this a controversial decision, or like you mentioned earlier, Oshaki Foster seemed like he kind of took his foot off the gas, like Conceicao take some rounds? Like, was this a controversial decision, or was it, did Foster just kind of not take his foot off? Did he take his foot off the gas throughout the fight?
I think,
because everybody's, there was a lot of controversy for this fight in terms of people being on Foster's side saying that he won.
It's I think Oshaki won, but I can see where, and it's going to sound like we know better than the judges, right? And we're not judges, but I can see where the judges would have watched it and thought, well, Conceicao's pushing the fight. He's kind of like navigating where they're going around the ring, because Oshaki's just kind of sitting back, hot-shotting, countering at times, just taking the punches. I think trying to maybe wear him out. It's kind of hard to really, guess what he was doing without speaking to Oshaki, obviously. But I can see where they kind of like fell down the hole, right? They were kind of like, they fell in love with the fact that Robson Conceicao was pushing the fight. He was pushing him forward. He was making him go back. But if you watched it more intensely, you could see that Oshaki that was like his game plan. He was a pot shot. He was like the Sonny Edwards. He was the Shakur Stevenson of the fight, because that was his style. And I think that's where he fell down. It's not the best style to watch, right? And that was, I think that's where the judges fell in love with Conceicao's style on the night. And unfortunately for boxing, it's it's kind of like what you like, isn't it? As a style, I can't think of the word right now. It's it's open for interpretation, right? The way that you watch a fight and the way that you'd score it, unfortunately. So yeah, hopefully the WBC do mandate an immediate rematch and we can get a decisive winner in the second fight.
But let's just say Foster wins the second fight.
Right? Go for a trilogy.
I mean, that causes trilogy, right? In terms of the business for Top Rank and ESPN, maybe they're kind of happy because they're just like, oh, we can make a rematch. And for this type of fight with these fighters' profiles, it's obviously a lot easier to make a rematch than it is for somebody like Canelo and those, and they're looking at like, oh, we can make a trilogy out of this, and people are going to be more invested.
Yeah, three paydays for 3 paydays for Conceicao.
Right.
Let's do it.
It's like, well, look at Devin Haney when he went to Australia. He fought George Kambosos.
Yeah, twice. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, I wonder. I'm interested to see what WBC says, but we'll touch on them later with the decisions and statements they came out with recently. Also, this past Saturday, from the Toyota Arena in Ontario, California, not Canada, California, which is in the Southern California area, on DAZN, William Zepeda remains undefeated at 31-0 with the third round knockout over Giovani Cabrera, who takes the second loss of his career. Obviously, Zepeda was the big favorite going into this fight. He showed again that he's the real deal. Like we mentioned earlier, he's ranked, I believe, number 1 in, I think, all the major sanctioning bodies, WBC, IBF, WBO, WBA. He's the guy next in line to fight any of those other guys with the major championship belts. What do you think about his fight this past Saturday? And out of all the fighters at 135 who carry one of these major titles, who is the most likely to step in the ring with somebody like Zepeda?
Well, in terms of the fight this weekend, easy work. Really easy work against Cabrera. I saw Cabrera warming up on the pads, and I was like, "What the hell is this guy doing?" I thought he kept dropping his defense all the time, and just looked kind of like slow, ponderous. And I was like, you know what, Zepeda's going to murder this guy. He's going to make such easy work of him. So yeah, I thought it was an easy night at the office for him, essentially. And then he's, like you said, he's number 1 in all 4. So the thing is, I don't think anyone wants him, do they? If you look around, I think he's going to have to, pretty much like force his way into a mandatory like he's done. He's number 1 in all of them. And I think Oscar De La Hoya was saying, like, mandate him. One of them, why haven't they mandated him? Like, who's he gonna face? So I kind of feel for him right now.
I think Stevenson is probably, so Stevenson holds a WBC. Haney holds WBO, or who holds the titles at 135? I'm blanking out right now.
135.
Stevenson has WBC. We obviously know that.
Gervonta Davis, WBA. Lomachenko, IBF. And the WBO is Denis Barancek.
Isn't Barancek fighting? Oh, no. Never mind. I honestly, I could probably see Zepeda versus Barancek. Right?
Yeah, because you've got what? Top rank, and then Davis is
Al Heyman.
Yeah, Al Heyman, I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing I can see. Like, Stevenson most likely will go higher on the list because now he's a free agent. And, he's a champion. So he's like, oh, I want to fight these guys. Stevenson obviously wants like a Ryan Garcia, a Devin Haney, a Gervonta Davis, and those guys. That's who he wants. But is he really going to get those fights right away? Honestly, I think Stevenson versus Zepeda is a good fight. And I think Zepeda would do his hardest or perform his hardest to make Stevenson engage. Because, Zepeda's a volume puncher and he throws punches. I mean, obviously Stevenson's slippery and gets out of the way and stuff like that, but Stevenson might be at the top of that list, man, because he's a free agent. I mean, and for Golden Boy, what do they got to lose? Like, all these other fighters are with different promoters or they're just not signed to Golden Boy. So, I don't see Davis fighting with Zepeda. I don't see that. I mean, maybe. Like I said, the business of Al Heyman trying to prove the business side of boxing to Amazon Prime Video. I mean, there's a higher chance than there was before when they were on Showtime. I acknowledge that, but I don't see a Davis fight happening for Zepeda. Top rank is still possible, but Lomachenko, Zepeda. I mean, there was reports that Davis and Lomachenko might be talking. You never know. That could be happening. I could see Stevenson, man, just because he's a free agent now. And Golden Boy's like, okay, yeah, he's got a title, and he's probably got the most visible, popular title in terms of the WBC. So yeah, let's go after him. Like, all the guys who are holding titles are all gonna be difficult fights for Zepeda. But Zepeda's already proven that he's earned a shot. But yeah, my pick's Stevenson, just because he's a free agent.
Show me the money.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, Zepeda's a real deal, man. Did we know what the attendance was at the Toyota Arena?
They gave a lot of tickets away. I got 4.
Wait, we don't know what the reported attendance was? Because it was obviously on DAZN. It wasn't a pay-per-view, but it's on regular DAZN.
I think I read like 9,000, 8,000.
Okay, that's not bad.
Yeah, they gave away, I think, 500 and something.
That's not actually nearly as much as I thought.
Yeah, just on the one site that I saw giving them away.
Right. Yeah, it's not nearly as much as I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if he did 9,000, because that arena holds what?
12?
At max capacity for a boxing event, and it holds what, 10, 11? 11 maybe?
10, 11, 12, I think.
Between 10 and 12? Let's just say 11?
Yeah.
So if he did 8,000, and we haven't verified it, but
we're going to talk about them in a second. Nate Diaz and Masvidal are a stone throw away.
Right, yeah. That was only just down the freeway right there, 30 minutes, 40 minutes down, 30 minutes down essentially. From this fight, that obviously affected the sales and the attendance. They were affected in both sides, but you're right. And then I know obviously Masvidal and Nate Diaz are higher profile names in terms of sports and combat sports, but yeah, that's true. That affected it when you have two competing, not just combat sports fights, but boxing fights, because Diaz and Masvidal were fighting in a boxing rules match. So Zepeda, as I mentioned, gets a 3rd round knockout over Giovani Cabrera, and we'll see where he goes next. I mean, Golden Boy is going to try their hardest to make a world title fight for him next, which I think he's earned it. He's definitely earned it at this point. In the co-main event, Ricardo Sandoval, 25-2, gets the 10th round knockout over Angel Acosta, who takes the 5th loss of his career. This was for the vacant WBC Silver Flyweight Championship. Sandoval has been on the show before here on the last round. What do you think about his performance?
Strange decision by the referee. I think I'm right in saying Acosta was winning on all the cards, and then Sandoval hits him. Acosta kind of like backs up, like he's kind of getting ready to, throw something or just taking a breather, and the referee just stepped in and stopped him on his feet. Bizarre. I don't know why. It's
Can we really be surprised anymore in this sport? I feel like we've seen everything. Are we getting numb to this?
But just, I don't think we see it less in California and, the places that consistently have boxing on a regular basis, right? Because the referees are just better. They've got more reps. They're used to being on TV. They're used to doing high-profile fights. And, this really wasn't a high-profile fight. I just found it kind of bizarre. So I wonder if they're going to run this back. But I think this was kind of overshadowed by a lot of other fights this week, and they didn't get too much attention. But yeah, I mean, I'd like to see it. I thought it was a good fight. I thought, Sandoval heavy-handed. Acosta was a little bit heavy-handed when he was, in the other divisions. Former world champion for a long period of time. I hope they run it back, to be honest with you, because it was a strange ending.
Do you think that Golden Boy? So there's obviously a flyweight matchup, and the biggest flyweights in terms of profile, money fights is Bam Rodriguez. I think he fights super flyweight. Then you got Chocolatito, Juan Francisco Estrada, who Bam just beat. Julio Cesar Martinez. You think that's where Golden Boy's trying to bring Sandoval up, is to get one of these high-profile fights with one of those fighters?
Yeah, essentially, you would imagine so. I mean, they skipped on fighting Sonny Edwards a couple of years ago. For some reason, they ended up getting the mandatory, but they ended up not taking it. I'm assuming they wanted to go down a different path. Maybe they thought that Sonny Edwards' kind of counter slick style was kind of tailor-made for Sandoval, who's very heavy-handed, come-forward fighter. Maybe they didn't like that matchup, and that was why they decided to go down a different path. And, he has had a loss since then, but he seems to be rebuilding. Remember, he had that, I think that was at the Toyota Arena, right? The one we were at. Was that the Honda?
I think so, yeah, I believe so.
Where he lost to that kind of random journeyman type guy.
Right. The ones you never expect, huh?
Yeah.
And then also this past Saturday, as we just touched on, right down the freeway, right down the 57 freeway in Southern California, from the Honda Center in Anaheim, California, in the same city as Disneyland in California, on DAZN pay-per-view. Nate Diaz gets the majority decision win over Jorge Masvidal. Diaz wins by scores of 98, 92, 95, 95, and 97, 93. This was sanctioned as a professional boxing match, so this counted. So if you're yelling at your radio or your earbuds or your AirPods or whatever that we're talking about these two MMA guys, this was a legitimate boxing match. It was sanctioned. So they actually fought. And now they're both had the same exact record in terms of boxing. They're both 1-1. I believe, like you said, it obviously affected the Zepeda fight. In terms of, maybe attendance, maybe viewers and all that. This fight, especially during fight week and the fight day of Saturday, Diaz versus Masvidal had a lot of attention, a lot more than I thought. It got a lot of attention. Floyd Mayweather had his fighter on there, Kermel Moulton, I believe, the young prospect that fights under Floyd Mayweather's promotion. Ryan Garcia was there, who we'll touch on in a couple minutes. I think there was maybe some athletes, some celebrities. I know tickets started at what, $25?
Yeah.
You could, if you wanted to go for a fight night and for like a nice night out and have a good time, in terms of pricing and all that, it was priced very, very good for the buyer. It was. And I think they had what? 18? No, not 18,000.
Yeah, but I think I read 18,000.
So depending on how you want to look at it, is that because there's always going to be people, they only had 18,000 because the tickets were $25. Like, or should we give credit? Like, how do you reconcile that happening? Having a high attendance gate in the building, but you priced it low. Is it still impressive?
I mean, I think so, because if you when it's going to be on TV, right? It's going to be on DAZN pay-per-view.
Yeah, and I'm sure DAZN love that.
Yeah, and if the fans are at home watching and they see that nobody's there, they're just going to be like, "Well, this is trash. There's no atmosphere." We complain about that when we watch the Joshua fights and stuff like that in Saudi Arabia. There's no atmosphere, so it's always good, I think, even for people watching at home, that they can hear some type of crowd noise. And then also, if they're going to put another one on, if they can say, "Well, we did 18,000 on the first one," gradually increase the prices when people get used to these type of fights. I think that's a better idea than just trying to cream the market and getting 9,000 people, and doubling it to like $50 is the cheapest ticket. But the stadium's half empty. I don't see the point in that personally. Especially if you're the fighter, I'm sure you want a bit of a crowd there. Especially for people coming up like Colonel Martin. I think he would rather have a crowd there who get to know him, and then he can establish a fan base and go from there. And for someone like Sean Garcia, Ryan's little brother, I'm sure he wants something like that, rather than just have make more money but you get half the amount of people there. That never seems to make sense to me, but that's how a lot of promotions do it.
And Sean, like you mentioned, Sean Garcia, Ryan Garcia's little brother, he was also on the undercard for this fight. Ryan Garcia was there, walked out with him and all that. I remember people were saying like, "Oh, I thought Ryan was in rehab." Yeah, that kid's just messing with people. Like, they take him seriously. Like, he just, it's hilarious. It's insane. And people are just like, "Oh, he said he was going to do this." I was like, you got to read through his personality, man. Like, he's an influencer, and he knows what he's saying to kind of get people talking. But like you mentioned, Sean Garcia was there. He took the loss over to Amado Vargas, who is one of the sons of ferocious Fernando Vargas, the former world champ. So I thought that was a cool little matchup in terms of name and star power. Like, Ryan Garcia's little brother against Fernando Vargas' son. I thought there was cool story, like the stories behind it and all that. It was cool. It was cool. And then like Ryan Garcia and I think the oldest, or not, maybe the second oldest Vargas brother kind of went face to face in the back, where they kind of were talking and stuff like that. And so it kind of laid out maybe future plans and all that. That was interesting. There's obviously a story there for the future. And then also on the card, Shane Mosley Jr., who I'm not sure if he's still with Golden Boy or not. I know there was possibly some tension there. I believe Sugar Shane Mosley Sr., or his dad, was at one point kind of criticizing Golden Boy that they weren't giving him the respect he deserves, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but it was something like that. But Mosley Jr. gets a unanimous decision win over former world champion Daniel Jacobs. Mosley Jr. won by scores of 99-91 twice and 100-90. Are you convinced for Shane Mosley Jr. yet? Or is he just able to be strategically placed on these cards where he's just been winning? What do we think here? Because Jacobs is obviously like, yeah, it's the end of the line for him.
I mean, he's timing them right, because he's getting your Daniel Jacobs, your Gabe Rosados, names like that on his ledger, just before those guys retire, which is, what a lot of the promoters and matchmakers do. So he's doing the right thing. In this day and age, can he pick up some type of world championship? Maybe. Is he going to be, an all-star world beater and stuff like that? Absolutely not. But, he's got the name recognition. Golden Boy seemed to like him. So he seems to be slowly...
Is he still with Golden Boy? I mean, this was a DAZN fight, but Golden Boy fought right down the way.
I think he still is, and maybe unless his contract's just recently expired. But, yeah, he seems to be picking up the right fights at the right time, and his name's still there. He's just beat Daniel Jacobs, and I'm assuming that's probably the end of the line for Jacobs.
Yeah, it seems like it. And also this past weekend from the Copper Box Arena in England on DAZN, Johnny Fisher gets the first round TKO over Alan Babbage, who takes the second loss of his career. This was pretty surprising, wasn't it? Wasn't Babbage the favorite here?
No, Big Johnny was the favorite. Babbage is just too small as a heavyweight. 36 seconds. What can you say?
Man,
He landed. That was it. It was pretty much, lights out for Alan Babbage, who is kind of more of a character than a boxer, especially as a heavyweight boxer. He should probably go down to, bridgerweight, if not cruiserweight, because he's just too small. But, just fighting a heavyweight just adds that extra zero, doesn't it, onto your paycheck, unfortunately. So you get the smaller guys just kind of eating themselves up to heavyweight just to get those extra zeros on the paycheck at the end. So easy routine win for Johnny Fisher, and I think they're probably going to move him slowly. And as everyone keeps saying, and they kept saying on the broadcast, it's just luckily for him, he's probably going to be wrapped in cotton wool because he sells so many tickets. And I think they were saying something crazy, like he did 3,000 tickets himself, like literally personally sold 3,000 tickets. Not just the fans bought them, like he actually sold them.
And then also this past weekend from the Copper Box Arena in England on DAZN, Johnny Fisher remains undefeated at 12-0 with the first round TKO. Quick night for him over Alan Babbage, who took the second loss of his career. What do you think about Fisher's win over Alan Babbage?
Easy night's work, 36 seconds.
Man.
I think everybody kind of knew going in, Babbage was, up against it. Smaller guy, really should be a cruiserweight or light heavyweight or bridgerweight.
I feel like Alan Babbage, we would talk about him, and he had a lot of momentum at one point.
Just because he was small and he would just throw so many punches and just keep coming at you. I think he just managed to kind of surprise some of the smaller heavyweights, and beat them. But, when he dropped down and managed to fight for the Bridgerweight World Championship, he came unstuck against, was it the guy that just fought Okoli, Rozanskull or something like that, whatever his name is, Rozansky. But he's just too small for heavyweights, and Johnny Fisher just kind of really did what he should have done. 36 seconds, first big punch that landed, pretty much had Babbage out of there. Looking for Johnny Fisher, like everyone keeps saying, I'm sure he's going to be wrapped in cotton wool by Eddie Hearn due to the fact he sells so many tickets. I'm sure they're going to want to keep that ball rolling for some time, so I'm sure he's going to be matched really well.
And also this past weekend, in a unification matchup for the IBF and WBA Super Flyweight Championships of the World, from Tokyo, Japan, Fernando Daniel Martinez gets the 12-round unanimous decision win over Kazuto Ioka by scores of 120-108, 117-111, and 116-112. Martinez picks up the IBF World Championship from Ioka, adding to the WBA World Championship belt that he already held going into this fight. What do you think about this matchup?
Good fight. I think Martinez just keeps getting better and better, really. Hurt Ioka in the opening round, controlled the early stages of the fight, but Ioka just came back and battled his way back into the fight. And I think Ioka will probably be looking for the rematch, even though he's 35 years old, big star over in Japan. He could retire if he wanted to, but I think he'll probably want at least one more crack at it, even though he's a proven 4-division world champion. Martinez, 32 years old now, probably looking at maybe, what would you want to unify against Jesse Bam Rodriguez? Or would you want to go on and try to face someone like Tanaka for the WBO? Interesting, which one do you want to go for? And I'm sure it'll be the one that's the biggest payday. And I would assume someone like Jesse Bam Rodriguez on DAZN will probably be the biggest payday, especially after, the few...
I don't know, that Japanese money's pretty enticing.
I'd like to see that. I mean, I don't what sort of purses does a newie get? You never see them, on Twitter or anything like that.
But because you see the type of crowds he draws and the posters and the commercials and everything you see around the country of him, he's a superstar. From our understanding over here, he's not just a boxing superstar. He's a celebrity. He's an athletic celebrity. So I would think but that's why he keeps fighting over there, and then that's why these fighters go and fight him over there.
Yeah. Must be earning some good money.
He has to be. He has to be. There's no way he's not.
Or else he'd be over here.
Yeah, and then he has an Amazon Prime Video Japan deal over there. where his fights are on Amazon Prime Video in Japan.
Good for him. Good for him.
And it seems like they promote that more than they promote their deal with PBC.
Right.
Because I've seen more promotion for that in Japanese social media posts from Amazon than I have for their PBC fights. So, I mean, it is what it is, but I think Martinez, I think he goes back to Japan to try to get that WBO title. I think he does. And then, because I think everybody could see that Bam Rodriguez is the most dangerous fighter. Not just in that weight class, but pound for pound, that kid is the real deal. He's the real deal, man. He's the real deal. And Martinez knows, like, okay, I come in with 3 belts, then that just increases my payday, my negotiation power. So, yeah, I can see Martinez just trying to go for that WBO belt in Japan. I can see it. I can definitely see it. So, yeah, this super flyweight division is getting exciting again. I mean, it's been exciting for quite a few years, but, you know, when we had like Chocolatito, Juan Francisco Estrada, Carlos Cuadras, all those guys just kind of fighting round robin like that, that was a fun time, man. The Superfly events that 360 Promotions would put on HBO out here in the LA area, they were fun fights, man. Fun events. So, I mean, it seems like we're kind of getting to that era again with Bam Rodriguez leading the way, and then, you know, I got Martinez with a couple belts, and yeah, I'm excited, man. I'm definitely excited. Moving on to fight previews. This upcoming Saturday, the 13th of July, from the Palms Casino Resort in Las Vegas, Nevada, on ESPN Plus. Zanabek Alim. Oh man, I can't even. That's a hard one. Zanabek. Let's stick with that. 15-0 goes up against Andre Mikhailovich. 21-0. So battle of the undefeateds for the IBF and WBO unification championships of the world. So another unification fight on ESPN. The names aren't too well known, obviously, to the casual boxing fan, but they're gonna see it's 2 world titles on the line. Listen, maybe I'll check this out, and it's on ESPN. Well, it's on ESPN Plus. What do you think about this fight?
I mean, I'm sure people listening to this show, know who Zanabek is, but the Mikhailovich, I mean, I had to look him up, look at his box rec, and YouTube his fights. If I remember rightly, I think it's going to be his first fight outside of Russia. He looks, well schooled, well drilled, kind of your usual Russian, I guess, if you can say that. I think Janibek's probably going to be too much. I think he's, just a better all-round fighter, bigger, stronger, and I think he'll probably take the W. Then hopefully we can see him in there with some bigger names. I'm not really too sure how Mikhailovich even managed to get it, to be honest with you. He never really fought anybody of note his entire time, mostly Russian opponents over in Russia. Not really had too many ranking belts or anything like that. Your internationals and your silvers and your golds like most American or European fighters do. But yeah, my money's on Zanibek. I think stops him late.
And in the co-main event, Raymond Murataya, 20-0, goes up against Tevin Farmer, former world champion Tevin Farmer, who's kind of, after a couple losses, kind of went into the shadows, but now returns here on a higher profile event. Murataya obviously fights under Robert Garcia and his team. So I think he's obviously coming in as a favorite. Easy win for him. What do you think?
All about what Tevin has left, isn't it? Former world champion, used to be skillful, kind of counter puncher as well as some of the other people we spoke about tonight. Doesn't have much power, and I think that's going to be his downfall. I think even if Tevin is still has some left in the tank, I think eventually he's going to get clipped, and I think Murataya will take him out. Depending on how much he does have left, I think I'm going to go for round 7, round 8. I think Murataya stops him.
If Farmer loses, why not why not do another fight with Jojo Diaz, who is no longer with Golden Boy, has also taken a couple losses. Crossroads fight.
I like it. I like it.
Right? Why not?
I mean, it'd be a hell of a lot cheaper doing it now than it was back in the day, right?
Right. Yeah, but it's a crossroads fight. Now they're both kind of like at almost exactly the same positions in their careers. Let's see who moves on. You're both at the same. If whoever loses, it's, might be the end of the road. Let's see. There's a story behind your matchup now because you guys already fought before. There's some type of investment there. Let's see what you got.
Loser leaves town.
Yeah, pretty much. Also, this upcoming weekend from the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on DAZN, in his debut under the Matchroom Boxing banner and DAZN banner, Jaron boots Ennis 31-0, goes up against David Avanesyan 34-1 for Ennis's IBF welterweight championship of the world. Avanesyan substituted for Cody Crowley, right?
Yep.
So obviously Crowley was a more formidable opponent, but in terms of, I don't even know how you can judge this, but in terms of notoriety, is Avanesyan a little bit more known?
Definitely in the UK.
Yeah.
Former Crawford opponent as well.
Right.
Kind of been in with a who's who of people, so people maybe just know him because of that. He's been, the B side and quite a few big fights, but I think it actually might be a tougher opponent in some aspects, but I still think Jaron Ennis is just that good that he would have come through both of them. And I think Avanesyan maybe just takes it into the late rounds and maybe even just takes it to points. Just kind of like old man him. He can see, he's been around, he can see his way through a fight. I'm just not too sure if Ennis is explosive enough to get him out of there. He might be, Father Time is, starting to creep up on David Avanesyan, so maybe Ennis may be able to get him out of there. But I do see Ennis winning, and then hopefully we can see him in some bigger fights.
And also on the card, Skye Nicholson 10-0 goes up against Diana Vargas 19-1 for the WBC Featherweight Championship of the World. And then news and notes section of this week's episode of the Last Round Boxing Podcast. So Ryan Garcia has been in the news. When is he not? He put out some colorful tweets saying some, I guess, racial terms out there, getting a lot of criticism and saying this and saying that. And then the Mauricio Suleiman, the president of the World Boxing Council, the WBC, puts out a tweet or a social media post saying that, I'm going to quote it right here. Quote, exercising my authority as president of the WBC, I am hereby expelling Ryan Garcia from any activity with our organization. We reject any form of discrimination. I fear for Ryan's well-being as he has declined multiple attempts for our help with mental health and substance abuse. So this was what Mauricio Suleiman had posted online to social media. Like I said, we talked about it at the beginning of the show. This kid is he's the product of this generation. Gen Z, TikTok. Like he's made so much money now after that Davis fight. He was already doing okay before, but the Davis fight really shot him up to the next stratosphere in terms of money. And the Devin Haney fight, he made a lot of money. He was already had the influencer personality. He was hanging around with like the Paul brothers and all these other people. And his network of celebrity influencers and just celebrity connects has grown drastically in the last couple of years. And I just feel he thinks he's untouchable. And he might, we don't know. We're not experts. We're not psychiatrists. We're not psychologists. We're not, he might have a mental illness. People think like, oh, he has a mental illness or this and that. We don't know. We don't know. I mean, like I said earlier, he was at the fight for Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal right there with his brother, his younger brother, Sean Garcia. And then people started complaining, what? I thought he said he was going to rehab. And then he came out later and said that he's like, oh, I'm not going to go to rehab. And then I saw, like, I think yesterday he was on X or Twitter saying, some people asked him about his brother's fight, how he lost. And Ryan Garcia said, he's like, oh yeah, he's like, because he got nervous fighting in a big arena like that under the lights with all those fans. It was a big stage for him. He couldn't take it. And he said he told his brother, he's like, I told him to drink a beer. He's like, drink a beer right before. It'll calm you down. It's like, we don't know, man. We could give him the, like, say that he has mental illness or this or that, and I know his dad came out and said, like, oh yeah, he has an issue. He has to go to rehab or something. Maybe, but we don't know. We don't know. I just think that he's gotten so powerful with the money. He's made life-changing money following that Davis fight. Like life-changing money, where he's like, it is what it is. Like, I can figure it out. Like, and I'm sure the WBC and Mauricio Suleiman loved that his statement that he put on social media was picked up by a lot of mainstream media sources. I'm sure he loved that. TMZ picked it up. ESPN, like regular ESPN, not even boxing ESPN, regular ESPN posted about it. I'm sure he loved that. He loved that. But it's like, is it fair criticism? Because the other people have said this too, whether people agree with his take or not, and in terms of what he's expelled Ryan Garcia from. But there was also a criticism that, oh, how come he's never done this to other fighters? There's been other fighters who have, had history of domestic violence, using racial slurs, terms, whatever. And he's never come out against that. So is there a difference? Like, is this the line? Is this the line that we're looking at? Like, okay, if you cross this line, this is what they're going to do. But everything else, they'll give you a pass? I mean, I think that's a fair question, right? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he just baffles me all the time, Mauricio Suleiman. Like,
yeah, they make up their own rules. I mean, all these sanctioning bodies, they all make up their own rules, and it's just like, you don't really stick to them.
It's like when someone tests positive for a performance-enhancing drug, they then do an investigation. I'm like,
yeah, exactly.
Why are you doing an investigation? You're a fucking sanctioning body.
Yeah.
And then they gave...
It's PR, man. It's PR.
100% it is. It's just, and it's as and when he chooses, like we said before, Valdez testing positive before the fight against Robson Conceicao, and then he just lets him fight anyway. And then gives Conor Benn an excuse for his PED thing, saying like, oh, we have reason to believe it's from you eating too many eggs. I was just like, what's it got to do? It's got nothing to do with them. But
let me ask you this, but when you're at that stature, in terms of being the WBC and being the president and just having the standing that you do in boxing, and when casual fans see belts, they think about the WBC belt. That's the belt that they think of. So the stature and the authority position that they have in the sport of boxing, at that point, when you're that big, don't you have to say something, whether people are going to criticize you or not? Regardless of the criticism that we just talked about, there's and I feel like that criticism is fair. It's like, oh, how are you going to say something for this but not for that? Like, is this your line? If this is your line, then just say it. But if he didn't say anything, there'd be cause for people to say, hey, how come WBC hasn't said anything?
That's the problem you have, isn't it? And then where do you draw the line? And then, unfortunately, if it happened in the UK, the British Board of Boxing can just ban you.
Do we need that? Do we need that in the United States?
It'd be easier, right? Because then somebody like the WBC and all the other sanctioning bodies wouldn't have to ban you. Or, it could just be the USA sanctioning body. Right. Hey, Danny, you've said this remark. We think you've broken this law. You're now banned for 12 months. And then the sanctioning bodies don't have to ban you or pretend to ban you like Mauricio Suleiman. because you've already been banned by the sanctioning body. And that's obviously the UK is much smaller than the US. It's multiple times smaller than just California. So,
Right.
It's obviously a lot harder to run something like that. But that would be the easiest way. It would be if you could just ban them from all sports, if they could do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it seems like this is the line, right? It's like, okay, so all these other instances from fighters in the past, that's not, those aren't strong enough actions for you to come out and do something like this. I mean, it is a business. They are a business. They are a business. They're a for-profit business. That's what people need to understand. They are a for-profit business.
I think they advertise themselves as non-profit, but
do they? Is that true? You think so?
I believe so. I think so.
Oh, I could be wrong. I mean, but you could be, I mean, we know this. How many non-profit businesses are out there that they're registered as non-profit, but they make a ton of profit? Like, think about it. So, I mean, that's just it's politics at the highest level in the sport of boxing. That's what it is, right?
Created in 1963, we are a non-profit boxing organization dedicated to promoting the safety and well-being of boxers.
Mm-hmm. Well, as long as nobody investigates them, or the IRS, or nobody looks into them, they can keep saying that and keeping that tax status in the United States, right?
There we go. There we go.
I mean, I'm sure they've been around this long. They figured out how to stay under that radar enough. We're like, oh, I mean, you would think, right?
Well, the headquarters is Mexico, right?
Right. So maybe that has a lot to do with it. It's like, they're in Mexico.
I believe that's the reason that the IBF always stick to their rules and you get random people as mandatories because their headquarters is based in America. So
right.
They have to abide by the Ali Act more.
Yes, and the WBA is based in
Puerto Rico.
WBO is based in Puerto Rico.
WBA is, where's that one then? It's not the US.
It's not the US. Oh, it's something. It's something else.
Full of the Gilberto Mendoza as well. I can't remember where it is. It's somewhere random like that.
Yeah. I mean, Puerto Rico is still United States territory. So do they have to abide by the Ali Act?
I don't believe so. I believe the IBF is the only one that's ever been taken to court for not abiding by the...
That's insane. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, man. Ryan Garcia is just, going back to him, he's just, he's an influencer, man. Like, and he's saying a lot of this stuff to get a rise out of people and just to gain attention. That's what it is. Like, he's gaining publicity.
Panama.
That's literally what it is.
WBA is based in Panama.
Oh, there you go. They're probably in the best position in terms of tax havens. So, yeah, for Ryan Garcia, yeah, he's getting all his attention, and then people are just like, oh, this and that. Like, the guy's, it's the money, man. He's made life-changing money the last couple of years, and he's like, I'm powerful. I don't care what I can say and do whatever I want because I have all this money. That's literally what it is. That's literally what it is. And he thinks he's untouchable. But if people keep tuning in and keep talking about him, it kind of just fuels his behavior, doesn't it?
Yeah, and what is it they say that when he actually brings out people's true colors or something like that? The old phrase. So at the end of the day, I think he needs help, right? He needs help. He needs some people around him. I think even his mum and dad and brother had said that, before the fight, they had to sit him for quite a long period of time. They kind of told him what they thought, that he needs to get rid of certain people that are hanging around with him and are dragging him down. And, he's not done that. So,
well, but yeah, I'm sure they've tried to talk to him, but like they were also part of the ride too, weren't they?
No, 100%. Yeah, he was the moneymaker for the.
Yeah, we were told that by intimate sources like that.
Yeah,
he's has multiple. Like his little brother just fought, but he has other siblings. Like it's a pretty significant family, and he's the guy. Like he's the main source of income. And even before he made all this money, that's why we were told by very, very reliable sources that's why he complained to Golden Boy and he complained online to try to change his contract, that he wasn't getting properly paid and stuff like that. And because he was feeling the stress and, the stress of being the breadwinner for his entire family. Like it was a lot of pressure, And now that he's got all this money, ever since that Davis fight, which blew him open, and then he obviously beat Haney, he got a lot of money from that. He's like, he's made extremely high levels of life-changing money. So he's like, oh, I'm good. So now, like, you're seeing him kind of like coast and kind of do whatever he wants. He's like, oh, I can do whatever I want.
It's like a Britney Spears meltdown, isn't it?
In a sense, yeah. I mean, it's just the nature of the game. He's not the first or the last in this world in terms of celebrities or high-profile people like that. There's going to be others.
Yeah.
And it is what it is. These young guys, they're growing up in this world. TikTok, Instagram, like that's their life. And let's see who can handle those pathways the best. That's pretty much what it is. But thank you guys for listening to this week's episode of the Last Round Boxing Podcast. Don't forget, we are on YouTube, youtube.com/@the Last Round Boxing Podcast, or just search the Last Round Boxing Podcast and our logo and name should pop up and you can listen on there. So if you don't want to listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify on all that, or you want to send it to people who don't use the podcast app, send them the YouTube links. We are now on there. Each episode will be posted on there in addition to our regular episodes of the general podcasting platforms. But before we sign off, once again, Mike, go ahead and let them know where they can find us and follow us.
We are at The Last Round 12 on Instagram and Twitter. Be sure to join us next week where we'll be previewing the big Jake Paul, Mike Perry fight, and Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. is back. Fighting UFC fighter Uriah Hall in a boxing match. Kind of a quiet week, so we'll probably try and get a guest on to chew it up with.
Yeah, we will check it out. So for my co-host Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round Podcast.